Good morning and welcome to Rose Red Homestead. We're delighted to have you with us. Today I'm going to play the part of a professor. I'm pretty excited about that. After retiring 2 years ago, I kind of miss being in the classroom once in a while. This video is a redo of one that we did about 4 years ago. I had been sick and my voice was very weak, and I don't think it came across very well, but it's a very important topic. It goes directly to self-reliance. And when I was in my doctoral studies at graduate school, I became really intrigued with a couple of ideas. First of all, I was so interested, science is my field, with math secondary, and I wanted to know, in terms of brain functionality, how people learn. How do people learn science? And how do people learn math? These complex subjects that it takes a lot of effort to ever become an expert in doing those things. I wanted to be able to help my students become expert teachers. And so the second thing that I became interested in is how, once we gain that knowledge and understanding how people learn, how do we transfer that into becoming an expert? Now, I know that as a professor who taught prospective teachers, that when those students graduated, they were not expert teachers, even with a college degree in their hand. They still had to have a lived experience in becoming a teacher. And becoming an expert teacher, becoming an expert at anything, is along a continuum from when you're a novice, when you first start out, and you follow this pathway to gradually becoming an expert. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of diligence, a lot of study to do anything at an expert level. So this doesn't apply just to teaching. It doesn't apply just to the topics that we cover here, like canning or food preservation in any way, shape, or form, or gardening. It takes a lot of effort. But the two things, learning how people learn and how the brain functions to help that, and then how we turn that learning into expertise, was very, very intriguing to me. And I was delighted when I came upon a body of literature and this was 25 years ago when I was doing my PhD studies. That body of literature was all about what the difference is between how a novice thinks and how their brains work, and how an expert thinks and how their brains work. And it is a learned experience. It is a continuum. And the first studies on the novice expert literature were done by a group of researchers who studied chess players. They interviewed those players. They asked them lots of questions about, what were you thinking when you did this move? Why did you make this move? And after hours and hours and hours and lots of interviews, they put together this article that explained the difference between, here's how a novice thinks about things, and here is how an expert thinks about things. Well, I just loved that. And as soon as that research was published, people in other disciplines immediately adopted it and started doing research in their own disciplines about the difference in how novices and experts think relative to a given content area. And what they discovered was pretty much the same thing applies regardless of what it is we are wanting to become an expert at. As we participate in this human existence that we're all in right now, we develop expertise in some areas, while in other areas we're still a novice. But maybe in those areas where we are a novice, we are wanting to become better. The human brain naturally is a curious organ. Curiosity is paramount in how we learn, because our brain needs to have things settled. It's called homeostasis. Our brains want to feel okay about everything. They want to feel relaxed about everything. But oh no, the brain also produces questions. We see something and we wonder, I wonder how that works, or I wonder what the answer to that question is. Curiosity kicks in. We do whatever we want to do, if we're motivated, to learn why something works the way it is, and that places us on that continuum between knowing a little bit about something and then becoming an expert at it. So these researchers have identified 5 ways of what it takes to be an expert in terms of thinking, how to think like an expert. And so today we're going to talk about those 5 things, and we can apply those 5 things to any area that we want to become better at. And we can do it by intentional study and action, or we can just let our brain do its thing because it's going to do it naturally anyway as we experience things. Although being intentional about things kind of will keep us on this pathway, and it will accelerate the process of becoming an expert if we think about things intentionally. So we're going to go through 5 things, and I'm going to give you examples so that we can have an understanding of things that we can shoot for to improve expertise at whatever it is we want to. I'm going to be using examples from my own teaching experience and also from this channel. And one of the topics that I'll be giving examples from is canning, because we do a lot of things about canning here. The first thing is a deep understanding of accurate content knowledge. And this word accurate is really, really important, because people can claim to be experts, but they don't have accurate knowledge that they are espousing or spouting. And one of those examples from canning is there are lots and lots of people out there who claim to be experts. In fact, in my university classrooms, I always pose the question about what do you think it takes to be an expert at anything? And if you all were in my classroom, I can pretty much guarantee what most of you would say, because over the years, that's what most of my students have said. And that is somebody who has done something for a really long time and knows how to do it well. And that is a common conception about what an expert is. But that applies to expertise only if what they know is accurate information. Because in canning, we know that lots of people believe that the way that they do things, the way their grandmother and great aunt did things, is safe, and they haven't ever killed anybody with their canning. And because I've been doing it that way for 40 years, I am therefore an expert. And we have actually had some of our participants say that. Well, I consider myself an expert because I've been doing canning for X number of years and nobody's ever died from any of my food. Well, that's not expertise. That's just plain luck. Because doing things in a way that flies in the face of scientific findings is a dangerous enterprise. And so it's very important that the deep understanding that we have developed is accurate in terms of whatever content knowledge is that we're wanting to talk about. So a deep understanding also is not just memorizing factoids. It is getting the concepts and then understanding how it works in many different circumstances. So how we think about things is really important. Knowing the big ideas in any content area and then fitting supporting ideas and details organized under these big ideas is really good. So over these almost 6 years that we have had our channel, it is pretty easy for both Jim and me to tell when we get questions, and we welcome all questions. And I'm not criticizing anybody's questions here, but we can pick out those people that are on that continuum of if they started off someplace around a novice or a little bit more advanced, but they're on the path to becoming an expert by the questions that they ask. For instance, someone will say, I really want to learn more about this. Can you recommend a place that I can go? Or I've searched and searched for the answer to this question, and I just need a little help and guidance in figuring out this idea that I'm stuck on. Now that's someone who is wanting to gain that deep understanding of accurate content knowledge. And compare that with someone, and we get this all the time, I just want to know if I can bacon with beans. I just want to know if it's okay to can butter. Well, that's a yes/no answer, and that's somebody who wants a factoid. And they're not particularly interested in researching and figuring things out for themselves. Rather, they just want somebody to tell them what to do. And that it does not speak to being on that continuum where you're wanting to really understand a concept of any kind. Now, in terms of accuracy of content knowledge, I have a story from my teaching that I want to share with you. I was teaching a class on science methods for students who were going to become elementary teachers, science teachers. And the assignment was to write a lesson plan for whatever grade level you would like to on a concept in science. And one of my students selected the water cycle. And she developed a lesson teaching about evaporation, condensation, and precipitation, 3 aspects of the water cycle that are taught often in the 4th grade. And so the organization of her lesson plan was beautiful. She'd followed all of the correct steps in terms of the teaching technique. But what was dreadfully missing was accuracy in the content. Had she taught what she was planning to teach, she would have taught misconceptions, particularly on condensation. She did not understand condensation. And so she failed her lesson plan. And when she came into my office to talk to me about it, she was just dumbfounded. She didn't understand why she had failed when she'd written this beautiful lesson. And as I talked to her about the accuracy of the content, and we're right here, she understood evaporation okay, she understood precipitation okay, but she did not get condensation. And so as we talked about it, she had read about it, she had an intellectual, she could repeat back what the words in the book were, but she didn't understand it when I asked her some probing questions. And finally, I had a little refrigerator in my office, and I had cans of soda in there. And so I took out a very cold can of soda and put it on our desk. And I said, okay, let's just observe this can for a few minutes. And as we talked about other things, pretty soon you could look at that can and there were water droplets all over the can. And so I turned to her and said, tell me how those water droplets got on that can. And she said, well, it's water from the soda pop that comes through the pores in the can. Well, there was a problem. She didn't understand condensation at all. The rest of us know that condensation is all around us. When we take a shower, close the bathroom door, the bathroom gets all steamy, and we look at the mirror is all fogged up. Well, that little fog that is on the mirror is condensation. The water vapor from the hot shower touches the cold mirror and goes from a gaseous state to a liquid state on the mirror. That's condensation. And so also this idea of as we learn things, we will be sorting through and expelling misconceptions as we work around those things, trying to fit them into everything else we know. Now, the second thing is noticing meaningful patterns. Our brain chunks things together automatically. We don't have to say, okay, this chunk belongs with this. Our brain does that naturally when we think about the connections. If ever you're reading along or working along and you say to yourself, wow, this reminds me of this over here. That's a connection, and boom, your brain has filed that correctly in the hierarchy that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But noticing meaningful patterns as we go, and if we are mindful about looking for patterns, it really helps the learning process a lot. So here's a story about that. When I was at a previous university in northern Utah, I won a wonderful grant to train science teachers. We would take them into the field and do all kinds of science inquiry. We did the tide pools in Oregon. We came out here to Zion National Park and did some scientific research there. Well, one of the professors that I hired was from our geology department. And this is the story that he told our teacher group about noticing patterns. He said, I come into my lab early every day so I can cook my oatmeal. I turn on a Bunsen burner and I put a beaker over the top and I add my oatmeal and water, and then I do things while it's cooking. He said the other day I just sat there and all of a sudden I noticed my oatmeal, the little flakes of oatmeal starting from the bottom were, as it heated, they were moving to the top, and then they made a little circle, and then they kind of dropped to the bottom. And pretty soon he noticed these convection currents carrying individual pieces of oatmeal up, down, and around because of the heat that was within. Higher heat at the bottom, cooler heat at the top. He said, oh my gosh, that is a model of plate tectonics. The continents that sit on top of the magma core are moved to bump into each other, subduct under each other, or whatever they're going to do by these convection currents of the hot material below them, heating, cooling, heating, cooling. And so just to test out his theory, he tore a paper towel into pieces and put them on the top of his oatmeal and watched as those pieces moved around the top of the oatmeal. I never in 1,000 years would ever have noticed that pattern. But because he was an expert in that field, he noticed it as a pattern and then used it as a teaching device. Now, third is this idea of how our brains work. And how they work once we start making connections is they store things in a hierarchical way. And what that means is the big ideas at the top, and then supported by supportive, lesser important ideas, and then details. And pretty soon we have this nice body of knowledge that we've stored in our brains, that our brains have organized, provided we have made the right connections. We learn something new, and the more expertise we have in something, the better we can learn a new piece of knowledge and know exactly where it fits. Now, a novice can learn these little pieces of information and not weave them together because they don't have those connections yet. But gradually, those connections, the more you learn and study, the more you seek accurate knowledge, the more those pieces are going to fit together to where we have a hierarchical organization of knowledge. That hierarchy is really important when we come to want to then pull some of that information out. So an example of the hierarchy of knowledge would be something like pressure canning is a big idea in the overall discipline of home canning. Pressure canning is a big part of that. That's one of the big ideas. Well, what are some of the supporting ideas under pressure canning? Well, understanding how much pounds per square inch, the PSI, is how that is affected by elevation, and how at lower elevations we need less PSI, at higher elevations we need more PSI in order to process a batch. And then other details as well as they fit under there. And so we can fit big ideas and then the subordinating ideas underneath. That leads directly to the fourth one, which is flexibly retrieving knowledge and information. And as we hit a problem in this discipline that we are becoming expert at, we can immediately pull out what we need and apply it. So at one time in my life, I thought I wanted to be a concert pianist. I took piano lessons growing up, and as I became an adult, I thought, oh, it would just be so wonderful. I longed to be able to be a concert pianist. But I was having babies quite frequently, 6 children in 10 years, and not a lot of time to practice, but I did take piano lessons from a marvelous concert pianist. As an adult, I did. And I would practice a couple of hours a day until the babies woke up and the baby needed changing or, whatever. And I learned something from her that was really, really interesting. And that was being able to flexibly retrieve information. If I had it up here, I could flexibly retrieve it instantly. She taught me that if I was learning quite a difficult concerto, and there were lots of chords. And in music, piano music, a chord is playing more than one note at the same time. We have 10 fingers, so we can play up to 10 notes, even more if we kind of bridge between notes sometimes. And so these chords are notes that hang on a stem, and they'll be on either side of the stem, and they're on the music staff. The staff has 5 lines and 4 spaces, and so the chord looks like this, and then it looks like fruit hanging on a branch. And depending on how close together those notes are and where they're placed on the staff, tells you exactly where on the piano that you need to have your fingers come down on for accuracy. And what she taught me was to look at that chord and immediately configure my own fingers in the way that if I came down on the right notes, I would be automatically hitting the right notes. And so that was flexibly retrieving information. Then I'd move to the next chord, and those chords sometimes come pretty rapidly. And so looking at the configuration, getting my fingers in the right configuration, and then coming down on those chords helped me move along toward a path of expertise. I never made it to the expert level of a concert pianist, but I learned a lot of things. So I'm still kind of in the middle on that learning curve. So if you say pressure canning to me, I can immediately pull down my whole body of knowledge of pressure canning and know if somebody has a question about that, boom, I can get it. If you ask me a question about something that I'm a novice at, I flub and flounder about a little bit. And so a novice might need to, if you say pressure canning, how do you do pressure canning? A novice might need to look up some information in a book, know what the equipment is, know what some of the rules are. But having it here, it's more than memorization. It's not just rote memorization of factoids. It is a woven tapestry of knowledge that is connected and interconnected and well understood, that you can reach up there and grab down whatever you might need. The last thing is adaptive expertise. Once we become an expert, if we ever reach that, the learning is not over. The expertise is never all done. It's not a one and done kind of thing. If we are a true expert, we continue to be adaptive. We adapt to new knowledge that is coming into our field. There's always new knowledge. There's always better ways of doing things. If these people who have commented on our channel that they've done things the same way for 40 years would rather have done these other things and especially the accuracy of their knowledge and stayed current and adapted to the best of what is known about how to do things safely and scientifically sound, then they would be back on that trail to becoming an expert. Examples of that are, we had someone ask us one time, well, I just stick my jars of pickles in the dishwasher and turn it on the sanitizing cycle, and that's how I can them. And someone else once said, I just put my jars of spaghetti sauce in the oven and turn it on to 400 for 15 minutes, and that's how I can my spaghetti sauce. So they're not here at all. And they're certainly not here. And so turning over and learning when we have a misconception, if something is an outlier and doesn't connect to anything else, that's something that we maybe need to research a little bit more to see how it fits with things. Jim and I both just get so excited, sometimes even for me to the point of tears, when we have people comment on our channel and tell us a little bit about their story. In just 4 or 5 lines of text, we've had people say, my aunt was badly hurt when a pressure canner exploded, and I have been terrified to even think about doing pressure canning. But because you have taught us that knowledge is power, I decided to start doing a little bit of research. And I have just canned my first batch, and I'm so thrilled. That kind of thing is the reason that Jim and I stay on this channel. Just the other day, somebody said, as she wrote, she said, I'm right in the middle of canning my first batch, and I'm so nervous and I'm so excited. These are people who are on that pathway toward expertise in canning. So if we can just remember to think about things in this way, this will put us on the pathway to becoming an expert in whatever it is we desire to know more about. Taking the time to do things right, to double check yourself, to make sure that you are consulting correct resources, trusted, tried, and true things in terms of canning that are published by accurate and valid sources, and then just move one step at a time and don't get impatient. Becoming a true expert does take time, but it takes time that is dedicated to these goals in our thinking. So I hope this has helped. I hope that all of us can continue to grow. You know, my dad, who was a true scholar, used to always say, Pam, he said, when the day comes that I don't learn something new is the day I hope I die. Only he said, is the day I hope I change my address, but we knew what he meant. And that legacy is also in my DNA, and it probably is in yours as well, because the human brain is naturally curious about things. And curiosity leads to seeking answers. Seeking answers from the right sources results in being on this novice to expert pathway. And I hope that we all see each other along that pathway. And thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you very soon for more videos.